Retribution never evens the score. And the second one I'll pick is grandmothers deserve the right to hold and cherish their young.
The Rational View is a weekly series hosted by me, Dr. Alan Scott, providing a rational, evidence-based perspective on important societal issues.
Produced by Soapbox Media.
The world needs evidence-based public policy now more than ever. Making the right decisions should not be partisan politics. Please help spread The Rational View by going to patron.podbean.com/The Rational View. Together, we can make a better future.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Rational View. I'm your host, Dr. Al Scott. This podcast is going to be a little bit out of the ordinary. I'm stepping out to interview a person who has firsthand experience exploring the Middle East as a Westerner who originally was brought up, Christian and, Midwest U.S. and went there to explore, why did 9/11 happen? What's going on? Why do these people hate us? I thought, in the spirit of building bridges and reaching out, and I wanted to look at someone else's journey and see if there's something we could learn from it. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. If you do, please hit like on your podcast app and come visit me on the Facebook group, The Rational View, and let me know what you think of this. Miles Spencer is a father and a mentor of tech founders. He says the similarities in those jobs are remarkable. He founded, financed, built, and exited 3 digital media companies. Prior to that, he was a venture principal at Capital Express and hosted Money Hunt on PBS. In his spare time, he's a painter and an adventurer who's hiked through the Saudi desert and lived to write a book about it. A Line in the Sand ended up on an Amazon bestseller in the Middle East. Miles Spencer, welcome to The Rational View.
Hey, Al, great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for coming to chat with us. You seem to have been quite successful in a very wide range of pursuits. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and what set you up for this sort of success? What do you credit as how you got here?
Well, I think it's important to note that with success comes plenty of failure. So I like to say results vary. Those 3 digital media companies that I was fortunate enough to exit included 27 others that never did exit because they failed. So it comes with the territory. Everybody talks about the successes. So yeah, just let's add some balance there. I think the origin story is that I'm a curious kid from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that just wandered a long way from home by asking who, what, why, where, when. And that pretty much is at the bottom of everything that I do, whether that's, you mentioned art, but there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of writing, just a little bit of entrepreneurship. And certainly our adventure was the product of just simply my reaction to 9/11 was who, what, why, where, when. That's what brought us there.
Okay. So this was a result of 9/11 that you decided you wanted to go into the desert and look at the history there and the geopolitics and what might have been behind some of this?
Well, that sounds pretty simple, and usually explanations in the rearview mirror do sound simple. But again, going back to that curious kid, I was trying to understand what had happened and why, and read a ton. That's part of doing the homework, right? And the book that really stood out to me was 7 Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence.
Okay.
It's Lawrence of Arabia. Okay. So in that book, he was assigned by the British to be the go-between with the Arabs in the revolt against the Turks. Now, this is 100 years ago. Now, the tricky thing about that was Lawrence at the instruction of the Brits, his masters, promised that if the Arabs made it to Damascus, Syria first, they would have a pan-Arab country encompassing everything we know there today, from the Levant down to the Saudi Peninsula. Sounds like a good deal as it raced to Damascus. Had to fight the Turks along the way. Unfortunately, the British had also promised that to somebody else. And so,
Oops.
and people lost their sense of humor when they arrived in Damascus. Let's just put it that way. So in any event, that was the inspiration that, or the best example that I found of a Westerner who had gone to that region, understood, and I'm going to call them the Bedouins, these are the tribal people of that area, okay, the Bedouins. Lawrence did a great job of not only understanding their culture, their backgrounds, their religion, their languages, but he was able to translate that and share that with the West. And I think he was the first person to ever really do that. And so, luckily, I had just finished the book when a good friend, Wells Jones, came through town and said, "Hey, what are you reading?" I said, "Seven Pillars." He said, "I just finished that." I go, "What'd you think?" I said, "What I just said." He said, "Me too." And then I guess that's the difference of the curious kid from Pittsburgh, right? If you keep asking who, what, why, where, when, if you're willing to do the homework, eventually you build the courage to go on an adventure which can lead you to a deeper understanding of what you're seeking. And Wells and I do a lot of adventures together, but we look, rather than just a personal best doing this or that, we look for things where we can bring back understanding and share them with others, just the way T.E. did. So we looked at each other and said, let's go. Technicality, we did not actually have an invitation or a visa to Saudi Arabia at the time that we declared let's go.
Interesting.
So we flew.
Before you left, did you watch the movie, the Peter O'Toole, Lawrence of Arabia?
Yeah, absolutely.
An amazing show.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It's based on a true story. Well, first of all, T.E. Lawrence was not 6'2", but he certainly was a charismatic, energetic, brilliant guy. But I find the writing that he did, not just Seven Pillars, but also 27 articles and some of the others, he's a beautiful writer. And even 100 years later, there are an awful lot of U.S. military that are stationed over there that keep that book in their backpack.
Really?
That's how good it is. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, what did you learn in this adventure of yours? Did you uncover stuff that's not common knowledge? I know, a lot of people have seen the movie, probably fewer people have read the book, but it's a vast, it covers a vast scope of area, and all of the history, as you hinted at. The British had promised this area to two different groups. Did the book go into what happened afterwards, or is that kind of extra?
Well, I think what happened afterwards was obvious. Open the headlines, turn on the news. Our thesis is that what's happening today in the Middle East, what's been happening for the last 50, let alone 100 years in the Middle East, was all set up in this moment 100 years ago. So what did we learn? Well, we went to just understand. It's amazing how much you learn when you're actually with the people, speaking a little bit of the language, certainly eating the food, but observing the culture directly. And one thing that I learned was we're incredibly similar in many ways. So when Wells told his neighbor that he was going on this trip, the neighbor's response was simply, "Go get him." Now remember, this was not long after 9/11, shock and awe, Iraq war, weapons of mass destruction. So I can understand the attitude from a Midwestern American, go get them. But that wasn't at all what we were there for. We were there to understand. And what I realized was the depth and breadth of my ignorance growing up, Christian in Western Pennsylvania. I went back and looked. Met my first Jewish kid when I was 14 years old. I didn't meet a Muslim until a few years after that. So I just assumed that our stories were it. Our prophets were it. And our religion was it. And I got to a place called Maghr el-Sheib. It's in the northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia, not far from the Jordanian border. You can actually almost see Israel from there. And our guide, his name is Ali. They're all named Ali in the book and in real life. He's going on about, hey, Ezra and Hagar and Ibrahim and Musa, those names sound familiar. Are you talking about like Moses and Ezra and Hagar and Abraham? Yes. Like, what book did you get that from? Because you're probably not reading the Bible. He said, I don't know. They're in the Quran. They're in the Quran. It's like, yeah. And he went on to name a dozen prophets and a dozen stories that he knew from his faith. And so we got on the satellite phone and we called a friend in Tel Aviv. His name was Avi. And he's like, hey, look, he's a Talmudic scholar. Like, he knows the Torah really well. I said, okay, hey, I'm going to name 12 prophets. You tell me how many are in the Torah. 12 for 12. And at that moment, I realized that I thought we were the ones and everyone was different. And in reality, we're using a lot of the same prophets, a lot of the same story from a lot of the same deserts. And there's just these little differences on the edges, but those differences, when they're magnified, create extreme religious conflict and strife. But let me assure you, there's a lot of commonality there.
I think, you have as many people read these books, you have as many different interpretations of these books. And when you're basing everything on your interpretation of a book, then, you're going to have all of these different sects pop up. And, even in Christianity, you have all of these different interpretations, the Mormons, and you have Protestants and the Catholics and Baptists and all of these different things, and it's all from the same book. So yeah, it's quite a journey to come into that just kind of fresh and pop into the desert. That's how much preparation did you have to do to get to start this adventure? I mean, this is a huge hike that you undertook.
It's not insignificant, and that's an important part. Remember, I talked about the curiosity, but after the curiosity comes the homework. And remember, we didn't even have a visa, at least to Saudi Arabia. So I'll tell you about that at the end of the story, but you got to hang in there for the first part of it. So we did a lot of reading for sure, knew our geography, studied a little bit of language, which probably most importantly was the protocols under our kidnap and ransom policy. So we literally had a policy where our extraction was pre-funded by a KNR policy. And we were trained by a Sergeant Major Jamie Lowther Pinkerton, who is an SAS security services consultant, previously with the royal family in Great Britain. Okay. I guess you'd call it England. And we went through 6 months with him of evasion tactics. Look, just don't get rolled up. And because of that, perhaps because of our kit, which was pretty tricked out, we were able to experience the region without fear, without anxiety, without trepidation. We were on our game and we were able to observe because we've done the homework. right? Not unlike entrepreneurship, not unlike raising two crazy kids. It looks like a incredibly risky feat, but you mitigate those risks along the way. And we certainly did. So the way we got into Saudi Arabia was, as you mentioned, I had hosted a television show on PBS called Money Hunt, somewhat of the predecessor to Shark Tank, like the grandfather of Shark Tank, and wrote a book with HarperCollins about that experience. And it landed in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And through YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, I got an invitation to speak. There's not a lot of book tours in Saudi Arabia in 2006, but I was one. And they gave me an invitation last minute. I thought, oh, Jesus, just for me. I need to bring a bodyguard. Everybody has a bodyguard in Saudi Arabia. So, okay, it's Wells. So I did the presentation. I guess they liked it because they said, hey, what else can we do for you? And that's a signal in Saudi Arabia that you're inside the tent. And so without missing a beat, we said, well, we'd like to hike 1,100 miles through the deserts of Saudi, Jordan, and Syria, retracing the steps of T.E. Lawrence. And they said, oh, Lawrence. And that was it. They had the blessing all the way.
So Lawrence is a figure in their popular mythos.
He remains a figure. Now, if you understand your history, now I'm not a historian. I just love history. And the Hashemites at the time had ruled over the Western Peninsula. It's these mountains that are on the Red Sea. But they had control of Mecca and Medina. You control the religious sites. You control the religion. Okay.
Right.
And so that's the Hashemite kingdom. Now, that's the core of the Arab revolt that Lawrence cut the deal with. And they were able, because everyone looked up to them as the protectors of Mecca and Medina, the holy sites, they were able to bring in other tribes. And so it's very wisely chosen. Mm-hmm. So they kind of vacate and move up through Jordan, what's now Jordan. Sorry, it's called Palestine at the time. And what's now still called Syria, but wouldn't recognize it. Anyways, at that time, Saud was coming from the east and gradually consolidating the entire peninsula.
Saud?
Yeah, that's either Saud, that's Saudi Arabia. Okay. It's literally means the Arab lands of the family of Saud, the Saudis, Saudi Arabia, right? So they overthrow the Hashemites. The only Hashemites left are currently in Jordan. That's King Abdullah in Jordan. He's the last of the Hashemites. So they have the long history, but they just don't have territory anymore. I have no idea what the question was, but I hope I answered it. That was quite a long story.
No, yeah, this is very interesting to understand just how you got permission and preparation to get through this. So, an 1,100-kilometer journey through the desert, you felt like you were prepared. You'd done all the training. You'd done all the reading. Were you prepared? When you went into this, were there unexpected things that threw you for a loop?
Daily unexpected things, I would say. We were trained, but there's nothing quite like approaching our first border, which is Hakal, is the name of it. That's in between Jordan and Saudi Arabia. We did have freshly printed visas, right? The ink's not even dry yet. And we approach, and what we had decided was that no person on the other side would know that we were coming. So it wasn't like our driver that brought us that would bring us through and keep going.
Oh, okay.
He'd drop us off and we'd walk, right?
Oh.
And that was so that we didn't get sold down the river. But in this particular first one, there's a tank with what is that? uh, 80 millimeter Canon. There's a panel van in front of us, like driving back and forth like this, like the ones that cause troubles when there's bombing in the United States or whatever. And the turret is just going like this across the, and it keeps passing by our car the whole time.
Exciting.
And so, I did what any normal person would do in that situation. I took a selfie. First, we saw a lot of tanks, like not just sitting around in a museum, like we saw tanks in motion, going places, doing things. But this was our first one. And so that crossing, as it turned out, it was kind of like a 5 out of 10 in terms of like heat and thoroughness. But I'll tell you a little bit about our kit for a second, and then now you understand why. Like, so we're both in backpacks. Here's pretty much shade, and my partner Wells is Navy ex Special Forces retired, so he looks the part, 6'2". It kind of looks like T.E. Lawrence, but tall. Right. Well, Peter O'Toole, but like a buff Peter O'Toole. So our backpacks contained a BGAN transmitter, which is a satellite transmitter. It looks like a laptop, but it has no keys on it. So when they open it up, it's like, well, what's this? It's like make signals up in the air, right? Cloud wasn't really developed at that time. It's like, all right, great. We had a solar panel for power that basically folded up like a napkin in your back pocket, but it was as big as a dining room table. And when you opened it up, it almost blinded you with a rainbow of light, right? They were expecting like a hologram. Phobon can nobody come out of it. So like, right, that's trick number 2, right? Yeah. 3 is a tough book. That's like military or law enforcement issue book. And we would blog every day, and we would take some photographs and take some movies and put them up in the cloud and then delete everything. So that every day we showed up, we had nothing. There was nothing on the hard drives. There's nothing.
Oh, good.
Right.
Yeah, smart.
But then the last one is called a PLB. It's a personal locator beacon. I had mentioned our KNR policy and our training, but this is basically a big pickle in your pants. And,
are you happy to see me?
But this particular one, when released, it sends a signal, and within 15 minutes, it won't call it in. Someone comes, looking for us. So when you roll up like that in a backpack, you get a lot of questions.
Sure.
But we just stuck to the story, which was all true. And eventually they let us pass. And, once we were in country and we started meeting people, they were so grateful that they had the chance to meet an American, to say, I'm sorry on behalf of the country, to say, we're not all like this. And please come eat with us, enjoy life with us, see that we're normal, regular people. And we all didn't do this. Just a few of us did.
That's good to hear. Were you able to get much uptake of that message back in the US? Or is it more people are angry and not willing to hear?
Well, my guests read the reviews in the book. I think that we've had this story for a while, and we've also been working on a play on Broadway as well. And that's kind of a different script and different storyline. And I've learned since that plays on Broadway take a little while to develop. And so after October 7th of 2023, we said, all right, we have a story to tell, and it really resonates with what's currently going on in Gaza in the last year and a half. And so it's time to share our experience. It's our experience. And by and large, I've been stunned by the feedback and the reviews. I never knew this existed. I never knew these things. You immersed me into a land and a culture that I just had only seen on CNN. And I've developed at least an empathy, if not an understanding of, quote unquote, the other side.
Yeah, I mean, most people's experience of that is just the news, and you see bodies and missile footage, and or burning the flag. I mean, this is really all people see. So it's amazing that you were able to break through that barrier and make these connections and bring this other perspective to your countrymen. I think that's important.
Well, thank you. It goes back to the curiosity, who, what, why, where, when. And I just wasn't sure I was getting the full story from the media that was available to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unfortunately, if it bleeds, it leads is true. And so what do you think you see on the news, right? And if you want to get some deeper truth and deeper understanding, you got to show up.
Do you feel like from your trip and your learning, do you have any lessons that could help with the current geopolitics that's going on, or any, what you have an inside perspective on things?
I don't work for the State Department. I'm not at that level. I'm an author. I have experience in the country. And I think when asked that question, I would have to answer that my first step would be to smother them with aid and kindness. These are people that are dying of starvation. No, I'm talking about Gaza at the moment. They're dying of starvation. They've more or less been caged for 25 years. There's not a lot of access in or out, even if you're a good guy. And Wells and I did travel with Palestinians who were enrolled in university on the Israeli side before the wall went up. And when the wall went up, their 5-minute walk to class turned into a 2 or 3 hour interrogation each way every day. So what does that create in a kid over 25 years? You're seeing some of that. And interestingly enough, these people have all lived together for thousands of years in that area. Now, 100 years ago, there was an influx of immigrants there. And that's going to tip the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, one has to be doubly careful about being compassionate and having empathy and having understanding. And our book is just one small step towards that.
Sure. On another note, I was reading some of your background. You style yourself as a stoic in decision making. And stoicism is an ascetic kind of philosophy. What aspects of stoicism appeal to you? What is it that brings you to this position?
Well, interestingly enough, at first it was the religion I was brought up in. It's a smaller sect of science called Christian Science, and some of the tenets of that I still practice today. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of overlay with Stoicism. So a big one is mind over matter. I have 1,000 stitches on my body. Right. I don't think I've shed a tear on any of those after I was 8 years old, maybe.
Which aspect of your history did you get 1,000 stitches from? Is there a Daredevil section in here that I missed?
50, 100 at a time. Knees and hamstrings, and wrists, feet, appendix, and you name it. So no major surgeries.
Wow.
But a lot of lacerations. Wells and I did Run with the Bulls before writing the book. And as you know, it's the prologue, not the first chapter of the book. Oh. And in that, one of the characters does catch it on the horns. I did not catch it in the calf, but I do have 200 some stitches on my knee. So it's just easier to describe on the calf. So everything in the book is based on a true story, but not entirely perfectly accurate.
Sure. No, that's good. I mean, you've earned your tagline as an adventurer, and that's pretty cool. I think that you've gone through this with a purpose as well, to kind of retrace the steps of T.E. Lawrence and understand just what is going on then and what led to it is really, really cool. So out of all of this, is there a message that you want to get across? What parting message would you like to give us about your experience and how it's affected you, or how you want it to affect the world? What's your legacy of this work?
Well, there are 5 tenets on the last page of the book, and I'll pull 2 of them and hope your listeners read to the end and get the other 3. But retribution never evens the score. And the second one I'll pick is grandmothers deserve the right to hold and cherish their young. Now, when you think of that for a moment, in order for a grandmother to spend time with her grandchildren in an area like that, all of them have to live.
Indeed. That's powerful stuff. And it's a message that it's not easy to listen to when you're ramping up and you're angry, and there's a lot of tit for tat. And I think that's been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And someone's got to break that cycle.
Someone does. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us here on The Rational View. Miles Spencer is author of A Line in the Sand, adventurer, entrepreneur, and father. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. It's been a real pleasure.
If you'd like to follow up with more in-depth discussions, please come find us on Facebook at The Rational View and join our discussion group. If you like what you're hearing, please consider visiting my Patreon page at patron.podbean.com/therationalview. Thanks for listening.